Hello guys, welcome to my video. This is going to be a watercolour painting and I will be starting by wetting the paper. This is very important with watercolour, especially with skies, so you can create that beautiful blurred effect with the paint. Here I'm starting with a mixture of Prussian blue and cerulean blue hue. This is using the Winsor & Newton cotman watercolour set. So I just made a mix of those and I'm just laying it on the paper. With skies, I find it's best just to go with it. Don't try and be too precise. Use a nice large brush and just lay down the paint. And it will move around by itself and you can sort of see the shapes emerge. Here I'm going in with some lamp black mixed with the blue shades just to darken the tone slightly in the sky. I am also using the Rowney graduate round wash brush. I find this was perfect, just the right shape. Here, what I do is I dry off the brush slightly and then I will actually use it to pick up some of the paint, and that way it brings back some of the light to the painting. I'm also adding some more of the paint here to darken near towards the buildings at the bottom of the sky, just to create a bit more depth. Here I'm just removing some of the excess paint as my board is actually on a tilt. Here I have switched to a Rowney graduate round brush. It's slightly smaller than the other one, just for slight more detail. Using more of the darker shade to add more depth. I'm just adding small details here just to add a bit more texture to the sky. Okay, so this is what I was talking about previously, is using a dry brush just to remove some of the paint, and this is really effective if you just want to bring back a bit more light to certain areas. Now I'm going into wetting the middle section of the paper, as I'm going to be working on the buildings now. Here I'm using the Graduate by Rowney. It's the flat wash brush. This is great just to wetten the paper. The colour I'm using now is a yellow ochre. This was just a nice warm yellow shade, which is what I wanted for my base. Here I go in very random, and again, because the paper's wet, it creates that beautiful blurred effect, which I really, really like when I use watercolour. Prefer to do wet on wet, especially for this stage of the painting anyway. I did initially have my pencil drawing, so I had my shape mapped out, which is obviously easier when you're doing something slightly more detailed here. The pencil I used, it was actually the Derwent Precision little pen here, which just gave me a nice outline to work from. Here I'm using a mixture of, I actually started with some Chinese white and a mixture of burnt umber, yellow ochre and cadmium yellow hue. Also a little bit of burnt sienna. I really wanted to keep it nice and warm. I also did wetten this part before I started applying the paint as well. I wanted it all just to melt into each other. Here I added a few details to the tops of the buildings just to establish a bit more shape. So here's when I went in with a darker shade. I darkened it by adding some Alizarin crimson hue to that mixture I was using initially on the buildings. And yeah, this just really warmed it up and adds some really great depth to the buildings. I really like this colour. Now I'm just adding some random shapes. I find with this it's good to make it ambiguous, don't be too precise with the shapes. I find it works so much better when it's just, ambiguous, not perfect at all. Works better when it's just very random. Throughout this painting as well, I did use a little spray bottle just to re-wet the paper if I do find it's drying out a little bit, because like I say, you want to keep the paper wet to retain that nice blurred effect. Okay, so here I'm just adding the finishing touches to the building, and then I go in with some trees. The colour I used was Hooker's Green Light, and I mixed that with some cadmium yellow hue just to create a nice warm green, and I blended that in using the Rowney dalon D77 brush. This is a nice round brush just to create those soft shapes. And here we go, I'm adding the details to the bridges over the river. This was a mixture of Chinese white, alizarin crimson hue, yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt umber. Same as the buildings, really, just to mirror that and add some really nice depth like it did to the buildings. I just thought it all blended really, really well. Like you say, I kept the paper wet by using the spray bottle every so often. It's really, really important, I think, to do that for me. Just adding some shape to really bring out those arches. Adding a little bit of detail to create that water-like effect. And the light's obviously coming through the tunnels. Here I'm just starting to add some finishing touches, going in with some details just to start to finish everything off. I must say, this was the first time I'd used these Winsor & Newton cotman watercolours, and I really enjoyed using them. They're very, very rich, and the colours just lay so beautifully on the paper. It's yeah, a really great paint choice, I think, for watercolour. Here I'm just adding some shadows under the bridges to create more depth there. And I think here it was important for me not to really dip so much into too darker shades. Like, I didn't really want to use the black shade at all, because I wanted to create a painting that wasn't super harsh. You know, I just wanted to keep it nice and light and warm. And you can do that by just using the dark shades of brown, and like I said, I added the red, and also using some of the blue shade just to tone down and cool in certain areas. Like on the buildings, I wanted a slightly more purple rather than warm brown. You can see the contrast here from the bridge to the buildings. The buildings are slightly cooler, which I do like. Yeah, here I think I'm going to be just blending those details, just because I found they were slightly too harsh on the painting. So I'm just adding some water just to blend those out. You can really see here how rich the tones are. I'm just really, really impressed with this set of watercolour tubes, definitely. You should never be shy when using paint in watercolour. Like, I think you should use more rather than less, because you want that richness of the paint to come through, and using more definitely helps with that. So I'm really just layering up these tones, which is something you will do in watercolour, is layer those colours, because as the first layer dries, it is going to lighten up slightly, and then you can add more on top to deepen those tones. It also means you do have to wait for the layers to dry, but once they do, you can add on top. Here I'm just adding a few branch details to the trees, and I also put in a few lamps along the bridge. Here I did use burnt umber and a tiny little bit of black for this. Now I'm just peeling off the masking tape, reveal those nice clean edges on the painting. And yeah, I really like how this painting turned out. I hope you guys do as well. I would really appreciate if you would like the video and also subscribe to my channel. Just showing you a closer look here. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.